This is Ben 10. And yes, it's official. Apparently, the original creators got tired of the animated reboots and decided to produce a comic that isn't just more realistic, depicting the aliens as genuine beings from unknown planets with grotesque and unsettling transformations, but also completely faithful to the vision they always had. A vision that certain companies, Cartoon Network, wouldn't let them bring to life. This new story promises to be the breath of fresh air for the Ben 10 universe that we've been waiting so long for. More than just a reboot, you can consider this the absolute and definitive version of Ben 10, with several changes that will take us to much darker places. So let's dive right in and see if this first chapter truly is everything it promises to be. In the vastness of space, one of the greatest dangers to any planet is deep in thought, Vilgax. He is desperately searching for the only weapon in the galaxy powerful enough to stand against him. Once it's his, nothing and no one will be able to stop him. No one except an unconventional hero. Ben Tennyson, along with his cousin Gwen and Grandpa Max, are camping in the woods. While Ben is obsessed with sumo cards, Gwen is more of a space science fanatic, or alien conspiracies as her cousin calls them. These two don't get along very well, which is why their grandpa decided to take them on a cross-country road trip for summer vacation, hoping their relationship would improve. This proves to be pretty difficult as the insults between them slowly start to escalate, culminating in Gwen telling her cousin that his parents sent him on this trip just to get rid of him. This really upsets our hero, and he storms off into the woods alone, completely unaware that danger is closer than he expected. Because while all this was happening, a military base scanning the planet's orbit with satellites detects a strange object approaching the atmosphere at high speed, and sooner rather than later, it crashed very close to Ben, almost crushing him. After a minor concussion, he approaches the newly formed crater, feeling weird being near it. So scared and cautious, he tries to leave the area and look for his grandpa. But a strange being already had its sights on him. A sort of venom-like symbiote approaches and latches onto his left arm. This strange object seems to be made of multiple cables, but with an organic appearance that makes him look like tree vines. Once it bonds with Ben, there's no turning back. He can't take it off. But there's no time to think, because a military squad led by Colonel Rosum has arrived in the area. They're here to contain the unidentified flying object and neutralize any threat that might have come with it. So Ben flees the scene. In the distance, his grandpa is looking for him. Seeing the strange cloud of smoke left by the crater, instead of looking scared or confused, Max hints that this isn't the first time he's seen something like this, realizing his quiet vacation is about to get a lot more complicated. Deeper into the woods, Ben tries to rip the strange object off, but he's interrupted by something even more unexpected. A sort of bear with robotic implants comes out of nowhere. It's an organic creature mixed with technology way too advanced for this planet. It looks highly aggressive and proceeds to attack Ben. He tries to calm the strange creature down, but sensing the danger, the device on his arm starts to glow, activating to protect its new host. It slowly mutates his body, growing extra limbs and even changing his skin and eye color, turning that 10-year-old kid into a giant four-armed alien. Luckily, despite the confusion, Ben doesn't seem to have felt any pain during the transformation, but there's no time to think because that strange bear who looks like Freddy Fazbear lunges at him, trying to bite Four-Arm's head off. Seeing that he couldn't calm the mutant bear down, he sees no other option but to fight. But to his bad luck, the transformation seems to run out of energy, slowly reverting him back to his original human kid form. Again, seemingly without pain, but definitely leaving him super dizzy from the DNA shift. However, the danger doesn't rest, and the bear tries to keep fighting. Luckily, Ben's great reflexes allow him to escape, at least for the moment. He asks the device on his wrist for help once more, and it seems to listen to him, giving him a signal on what to do by emitting a bright light where he needs to press. Ben understands instantly, transforming this time into a creature completely different from the last. This new alien is made entirely of fire, reinforced by light armor and a mask made of obsidian or some other unknown heat-resistant material. But despite this bizarre situation, Ben doesn't panic upon seeing himself covered in flames. He's clearly confused, but tries to understand what's happening, even attempting to push the attacking bear away so he doesn't lose control and end up hurting it. A pretty noble attitude on his part. Still, with no other option, he unleashes a massive blast of fire that burns and scares the bear, sending it fleeing back into the woods. Ben immediately realizes that, despite how awesome everything happening is, it's still dangerous, not only because he could accidentally burn down the entire forest, but also because that explosion would undoubtedly attract the military's attention, and that happens sooner rather than later. He flees the scene while the soldiers look in shock at the scorched remains left by the thermal explosion. They notify the colonel, who gives direct orders to locate and neutralize whoever caused all these disasters before it's too late. From this moment on, Ben's whereabouts are unknown. His cousin Gwen tries to contact Grandpa Max, getting worried when he doesn't answer the phone. Meanwhile, as Grandpa continues searching for his grandson, we see him with a fairly calm and thoughtful attitude, dropping a line that heavily implies he knows a lot more than he lets on. Figured something like this would happen eventually, just not this soon. Meanwhile, waiting patiently in his ship, Vilgax detects the energy signatures created by the device he's been looking for, locking onto its coordinates on Earth. But surprisingly, the Conqueror of Worlds looks pretty beat up, perhaps from a battle to get the weapon before it slipped through his fingers, since we see his armor full of scratches and cracks, and clearly incomplete. Plus, he has a large scar on his face that looks fresh. But despite it all, Vilgax won't stop until he achieves his goal, sending his closest prime operative to Ben's coordinates to retrieve the weapon. A weapon that, without our hero knowing it yet, is the key to ruling the universe, though in the right hands, it could also be the best chance to save it. And that's how the first issue of this reinterpretation of the original series ends, adapted to modern times with a more serious and realistic style. It's going to be a monthly release, so as soon as a new issue drops, we'll review it and discover the changes this new run brings, because at this point, many of you have surely already noticed a lot of the differences between this comic and the first episode of the show. The first one is that Vilgax isn't chasing the ship carrying the Omnitrix. Instead, he's tracking the meteorite it was launched in. This implies that Earth was always the primary destination it was meant to reach from the very beginning. It's a small detail, but it could become hugely important later. Remember that the Omnitrix's arrival in the original series was partly an emergency situation when the ship was cornered by Vilgax, jettisoning the device to Earth so it could be found by Grandpa Max. Max, of course, is an agent for the Plumbers, a top secret and highly important organization that has protected Earth from extraterrestrial threats for decades, with Grandpa Max being one of their most important and respected members. There are some hints of this in this first comic too, with the grandpa dropping very ambiguous lines and having a pretty calm and collected attitude for someone who supposedly doesn't know what's going on. Here, Ben's obsession with collecting sumo cards is shown right from the start, whereas in the show it took a few episodes. Meanwhile, Gwen keeps her intellect and smart girl attitude, but with the addition that she genuinely seems interested in alien conspiracies, as Ben calls them. She has a real interest in space and the secrets it hides. This detail could allow Gwen to provide even more context and information regarding what's happening to Ben in future issues, helping him understand his situation and strengthening their complicated family dynamic. And speaking of family, it seems that what's going on between Ben and his parents is much more complicated this time around. In the original series, Ben is more of an immature, rebellious kid, but never malicious. He's just a kid who doesn't weigh the consequences of his actions. This annoys his parents, but they understand he's just a child, sending him with his grandpa so he can learn something valuable from him, hoping he'll mature a bit by the end of summer break. But in this comic, looking at Ben's violent reaction, it's possible his parents are dealing with much bigger issues, whether financial or even in their marriage. Having a problematic little kid might just be too much for them right now. They opt for a decision that, while seeming the same as the original series, carries a very different intention this time. Even Gwen notices that his parents don't want to be around Ben, pointing out that their real goal was indeed to get rid of him for a while, so they could catch a break and fix their own problems. This deeper, more grounded situation could lead to moments and conversations with Grandpa Max that make Ben appreciate and trust him more. It makes him feel safe around him, almost as if Max is the father figure he might not have had at home. But when it comes to truly major changes in the comic, there's the Omnitrix's arrival on Earth. Because it crashed in a meteorite, this device feels wilder and more dangerous, something Ben himself notices when he feels weird near the crater. It's highly likely this is due to the space radiation the site is emitting. It's possible that if Ben had stayed near it for too long, it could have irreversibly altered his DNA. The biggest example of this is the robotic bear he fights, an original enemy for the comic that never appeared in the show. This could be a nod to Dr. Animo's creations, mixed with the robots Vilgax sends to hunt Ben down. But my theory is that this was just a regular bear that got too close to the crater, mutating into this half-organic, half-robotic, but utterly aggressive beast. And if this is true, it would mean that if the Omnitrix hadn't latched onto Ben and saved him, intentionally or not, our hero's fate would have been very similar to Freddy the Bear. The thing is, the Omnitrix seems to have a mind of its own. This was also mentioned a couple of times in the original show, where it could make the most appropriate decisions based on its own judgment, like turning Ben into the right alien for the situation. However, if I remember correctly, that plot thread never gained much traction in the series. Meanwhile, in this comic, it looks much more feral, like some sort of prototype galvanic mechamorph, meaning upgrade. It's made of cables that, due to the context and lighting, look like organic vines. We already know the Omnitrix can change its appearance throughout the series, so this primitive form could be an adaptation either to the planet it landed on or to the organic matter found in the meteorite. A very important detail right now is that this first issue of the comic comes with a huge amount of variant covers. Some of them keep pretty similar characteristics in terms of design and style, while others seem to be done by different artists bringing their own vision to the realistic designs this modern take is going for. I bring this up because the Omnitrix maintains a fairly consistent look across the covers, though some are more stylized than others. For example, there's one where it clearly looks like it's made of technological cables rather than organic ones, but another cover shows it with the original design from the show, much sleeker and with the classic style we all know and love. These artistic interpretations across covers are also reflected in the alien designs. For instance, look at how Wildvine radically changes from one cover to the next. On this one, he looks more feral and intimidating, like a humanoid carnivorous plant covered in thorns. Meanwhile, on this other one, we see him looking a bit more cartoony and exaggerated, something you also notice with most of the other aliens featured on that same cover. However, we can easily figure out that the canonical design will undoubtedly be the one from the main cover, since we can see that the looks for both Heatblast and Forearms are identical to the panels in the comic. A fun fact is that in the original series, the first alien Ben turns into is Heatblast, whereas in this comic, it's Forearms. It's a small change, but it could be a nod to how in the original show, his most used transformation is precisely Forearms. It's practically a meme in the community, only surpassed by the ridiculous amount of times teenage Ben uses Humongousaur in later seasons. Even though they haven't directly shown us the rest of Ben's aliens yet, on the cover, we can spot the designs for the 10 he'll have this time around. What really stands out is the absence of Wild Mutt, Ripjaws, and Ghost Freak. They've been replaced by the previously mentioned Wildvine, Overflow, and Cannonbolt. Cannonbolt actually has one of the most striking designs. Even though he doesn't change as much as Wildvine, he stands out for having a much scarier face compared to his sleeker design from the original show. This time, he looks like an actual space monster, and not just a giant, slightly adorable armadillo. Upgrade, for his part, doesn't have too many changes, keeping his simple yet elegant design. The only difference is that the glowing green circuitry is more erratic, looking more like vines or veins. This is very similar to how the Omnitrix looks, perhaps a nod to the fact that the watch is made from the same species as Upgrade, just with a different purpose. We already touched on Wildvine, highlighting his terrifying appearance. While his version in the original show looked unsettling, it's nothing compared to this comic, where he looks like a true overlord of vegetation. Forearms is one of those who keeps his design without too many changes. He does sport a scarier face, mostly due to the art style used in this comic, making him look more asymmetrical and intimidating. But without a doubt, the most interesting detail, even if it doesn't stand out too much, is what we see on his skin. bulging veins, and especially scales and wrinkles that really show his composition is from another planet. It's very possible this detail stems from the fact that his appearances are physical modifications of Ben's own body, and the veins and rough patches symbolize how Ben's human body adapts and stretches to fit forearms musculature. Diamond Head remains practically identical, with the only caveat being the same detail we just mentioned with forearms. His texture is more realistic and imperfect. He has cracks all over his body, unlike the pristine, polished Diamond Head from the original series. This design is a much more feral version of a prism hailing from another planet, and a much more dangerous environment. Gray Matter has a design more in line with the classic extraterrestrial look: gray skin, big head, and large eyes. But thanks to the art style, he manages to look unsettling while still highlighting his massive intellect. Overflow isn't one of the classic aliens. He appeared in later seasons, with abilities based around being a hydro pump capable of shooting high-pressure water, along with having pretty durable armor. However, his comic version looks much more robotic, bigger and clunkier. It's possible this new version takes the liberty of giving him a different origin story, maybe something closer to how Azimuth, the creator of the Omnitrix, developed his own species, the Galvanic Mechamorphs, Upgrades race. Only this time, maybe we'll see a being with similar intelligence but less respect for life in the galaxy, forcefully modifying creatures with technology and creating these kinds of beings whose bodies seem geared more towards efficiency than adaptation. And another alien who could share a similar origin to Overflow is the classic Accelerate. Unlike his original design, where he looked like a sort of velociraptor with minor technological enhancements, like the retractable mask that covered his face at will, or even the spheres on his feet that gave him more speed, his comic design goes for a much more technological approach. He has armor covering his entire body, and far less subtle wheels on his feet. He feels more like a hybrid between a fast organic being and a machine built for speed, leaning heavily towards the latter. Even though Stinkfly doesn't change too much since he's a bug, and we all know bugs tend to look pretty terrifying when you look closely at them. This time, unlike the original show, he sticks closer to the standard of a regular insect. He has details that make him look like a praying mantis, but mixed with parts from other bugs. Ironically, this makes him look less unsettling than the rest, since he closely resembles creatures we actually have here on Earth. Lastly, we couldn't forget the classic Heatblast. We already talked about him quite a bit during the comic recap, highlighting his armor made of obsidian or some fireproof space material. It makes him look even cooler than his classic design, which was already pretty iconic. Only this time, it makes him look more like a being adapted to fire itself, rather than an elemental being that just took on a humanoid shape. This doesn't make it a better design than the original, nor a worse one. It just makes it different and unique in its own way. And that's exactly what they tried to do with the rest of the aliens, making sure their inspiration from the classic designs is clear, while bringing visual and narrative details that fill this reinterpretation with tons of style and a unique focus that's hard to ignore.